cause to preserve the Union. And I'd like to share the letter that I wrote to Mrs. Bixby with you this afternoon. It began like this. Dear Madam, I have been shown in the files of the War Department a statement of the Adjutant General of Massachusetts that you are the mother of 5 sons who have died gloriously upon the field of battle. I feel how weak and fruitless must be any words of mine which should attempt to beguile you of the grief of a loss so overwhelming, but I cannot refrain from tendering to you the thanks of the Republic they died to save. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. I sign my letter to Mrs. Bixby, yours most sincerely and respectfully, Abraham Lincoln. In honor of her sons and all the men and women who have worn the uniform of our nation and given the last full measure of devotion in its defense, I ask you to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. My fellow citizens, while some of us may differ in political opinions, still we are all united in one feeling for the Union. We all believe in the maintenance of the Union, the maintenance of every star and every stripe of our glorious flag. And I ask you to permit me to express the sentiment that upon the union of the states, there shall be between us no difference. I am invited and called before you to participate today in our annual observance of Flag Day. In the spring of 1861, on my way to Washington, I was in Philadelphia where I participated in the raising of a flag before Independence Hall with a new star on it. I propose to say that when our flag was originally raised, it had but 13 stars. I wish to call your attention to the fact that under the blessing of God, each additional star added to that flag has given additional prosperity and happiness to this country until it has advanced to its present condition. And its welfare in the future, as in the past, is in your hands. Cultivating the spirit which animated our fathers, cherishing that fraternal feeling which has so long characterized us as a nation, excluding passion, ill temper, and precipitate action on all occasions, I think we may promise ourselves that not only that new star placed upon that flag shall be permitted to remain there to our permanent prosperity for years to come, but additional ones shall from time to time be placed there until we shall number, as was once predicted by a great historian, hundreds of millions of happy and prosperous people. With these few remarks, I take pleasure in performing the part assigned to me on this occasion in, I hope, a satisfactory manner. My friends, 150 years and 17 days ago today, a battle began in and around the small Pennsylvania town called Gettysburg. Over that 3-day period, 50,000 Americans fell dead or wounded. The rivers and creeks that flowed through Gettysburg and the adjoining battlefields ran red with blood for weeks after the last shot had been fired. But whether that blood had flowed out from the veins of a Union soldier wearing blue or a Confederate soldier wearing gray, it was all red American blood. The decision was reached to construct a national cemetery upon the site of the battle, and if I recall the words of the invitation correctly, as Commander-in-Chief, I was invited to make a few appropriate remarks. I was not the main speaker that day. That was Dr. Everett, a noted orator of the time. Dr. Everett rose and began to speak and speak and speak. Nearly 2 full hours. And the longer he talked, the more worried I became, because I knew that my prepared remarks were going to last about 2 minutes. I'd like to share those remarks with you this afternoon and ask you that you listen not only as an American living nearly 150 years later, but also as one living in the midst of our great Civil War, which pitted friend against friend, brother against brother, even father against son. My friends, my fellow Americans, I ask you to join me in November of 1863 on the battlefield of Gettysburg. Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. But it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. My friends, my fellow Americans, I thank you for your kind attention and remain, as always, your obedient servant, Abraham Lincoln.